You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. During tax season, your personal info travels to a lot of places. Between payroll, your tax consultant, and the IRS. If your W-2 gets exposed, that's just the ticket for identity thieves. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it guaranteed or your money back. Don't let identity thieves take you for a ride. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
All right, welcome to We Are Libertarians Daily. I am Hodey Johns. I'm actually joined with a superhero within the Libertarian Party, Laura Ebke. Laura, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Hodey. How are you?
Doing great. A lot better now that you're here, that's for sure.
Oh, all right.
So I'm trying to pick one of the billion questions that we have for you. I think election's still on everybody's brain. And of course, you probably just want to unwind from the whole thing, but everybody else is wound up. So I'm sure this hasn't gotten old yet, has it?
Not too much. No, I actually, it's been 2 weeks almost now, and it's kind of nice to, I've kind of moved on, and not everybody moves on as fast as I do to things, but I always believe that when one door closes, another one opens, and so I'm excited to move on to the next stage, whatever that is.
Sure. Yeah, well, let's start with the basics here. You've actually won an election before, which is, for most people listening to this podcast, that's unheard of. Now, you did so as a Republican, but you became a Libertarian afterwards. But just winning it all, I think, is something that we in the Libertarian Party have a tough time even grasping. So what did it take for you? What would be your tips to anybody? What did you do as far as actually winning an election?
Well, first of all, I've won 4 elections. I was elected 3 times to my local school board. And so before I ran for the legislature. So, one of the things to win that's kind of important, I think, is to run for the right thing and to establish some credibility. And so I was on the school board for 3 terms for 12 years. It gave me an area of expertise in schools and gave me a reputation in my hometown, at least. To win the legislature the first time, it was a really tough race. We have term limits here in Nebraska, and we actually run on nonpartisan tickets. It's kind of one of those weird things, but our legislature is a nonpartisan legislature. And so while I was a registered Republican, I wasn't actually running as a Republican. And so, the parties do get involved at some level, but on the ballot, it doesn't show up as an R or a D or anything else. It's just a nonpartisan race. And so, the things that you have to do to win an election, you have to knock on a lot of doors, and you have to raise money, and you have to be prepared to send out advertisements, mail pieces, and things like that. And you have to be willing to take the slings and arrows that come along with running a serious race. If you know that you're being taken seriously and that you're a threat to somebody when they start sending out the nasty mail pieces or run the nasty radio ads about you.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think all of us can long for the day when we get the hate mail about us. That really means we've made it in the business.
Well, then I guess I've made it.
Yeah. No kidding. Yeah, talk about being in the spotlight as far as state senators go. Yeah. I mean, just even compared, party aside, you were probably one of the most notable name recognition as far as state senator goes across the entire nation. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, I think it's I was pretty Nebraska state senator. A typical Nebraska state senator is pretty nondescript in most most of the time. And then when I made that switch to the Libertarian Party, I always tell people that I became sort of a celebritarian. It was strange for me because I wasn't expecting, when I made the switch, I really wasn't expecting much attention, and all of a sudden people started calling me and inviting me to their state conventions, and it got to be kind of a big deal. I felt after I made that switch and people started paying attention to what I was doing in Nebraska, I think I felt more pressure to actually, do libertarian things. Even though I was a pretty libertarian to begin with, I was much more conscious about what kinds of things that I would introduce, what kinds of bills I would introduce that would promote the cause without hopefully, destroying my chances of getting reelected. So you do things like, my occupational licensing reform bill was a big deal, and we got it done on a tripartisan basis in the legislature, and the governor signed it, and we were the first state to really introduce anything really big that way. So it was a lot of fun, but I think very libertarian, because it points, in a practical sort of way. It's not one of those, occupational licensing reform isn't one of those real sexy kinds of things, the big ticket items for libertarians, but it's very practical. And so we were really excited to get that one passed. But yeah, the kind of, I told somebody a little while ago, I said, I've got five state conventions that have invited me since the election. I thought, okay, they're going to just drop me like nothing. And since the election, I've been invited to 5 state conventions, in March, April, and May of next year. So.
Wow. And I got to give you credit here, because you were like, okay, I'm going to take a step back, but is there anything I should take a look at? And I was like, oh, maybe I can get an interview with her. And then there was like 500 comments, and I was like, well, I'll throw my hat in there and see what happens. So I really appreciate you taking the time to respond to that.
Sure.
Because I was one of many, but I really appreciate you making that one of the many. So let me ask you, because I want to get back to the Libertarian, what made you switch, what was your journey there. But before we get into that, what made you a great fit you talk about Libertarians fitting for the right position, or I guess people fitting for the right position that they're running for election on. What made you a right fit for a school board and then state senate?
Well, part of it is just opportunism. In my community, when we elect school board, we elect 3 members at a time, and so it's 3 members for 4-year terms, and then another 3 in the next 2 years. And there were a couple of people that were getting ready to leave the school board, and kind of traditionally, it's a fairly good sized school board, fairly good sized community, so it's not like they have trouble finding people, but traditionally. They asked, I had somebody ask me at church actually one day, hey, why don't you run for school board? Because I'm leaving, I'm leaving the board. And so that sort of got me interested in it originally. And, I have, my mom was on the school board in my hometown. And so it made a lot of sense that would be a place where I could serve. It wasn't a huge time commitment. 1 meeting a month, and a couple of other small meetings during the year. So that made a little bit of sense for me to do that. I enjoyed my time on the school board, but after about, you can serve on the school board for an unlimited amount of time. But it made sense for me to look for something else. Nebraska has term limits in the legislature. And the end of my 3rd term of the school board was going to coincide with the end of my my predecessor's time in the legislature, and I thought, well, might be a good time to try something different. If I was going to ever try to do something at a higher level, made sense to do it at that point. And so I ran. There was another guy that decided to run because of term limits as well, and it made sense. But part of it is know what you're getting into. On the school board, I'd seen what my mom had done on the school board, and I'd been around people who'd been on the school board, and I went to school board meetings, and so I knew what I was getting myself into. Same way with the legislature. I'd been around the legislature and watched, as an advocate with Campaign for Liberty and things like that. So I had watched what the legislature was up to. So, felt some level of, okay, I know what I'm getting myself into, and what things are done at the state level and what things aren't. So whatever you decide to run for, know what it is that you're running for.
Sure.
And, don't, if you're running for the local school board, don't talk foreign policy, talk about things that matter based on your, what you're running for.
Right. Okay. Makes a lot of sense here. Let me let's go to the next step here, and I guess, well, first of all, we hear Nebraska, Laura Ebke, term limits and occupational licensing reform. You're gonna become the next Free State project pretty soon here, with a resume like that.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
To move to the next step. I have so many questions about this, but let me just break it down piece by piece. What made you a Republican to start with? How did you identify with Republicans? And what libertarian values did you maybe have, even though you were registered as a Republican? Because I have a similar journey to that.
Yeah, I'm old. I grew up in a Goldwater household. I mean, the family lore is that my first word was Goldwater. I don't really believe that's true, but that's what my dad and my grandfather used to tell me all the time. And so my view of Republican Party politics has a strong strain of libertarianism in it. Kind of the Goldwater to Reagan model of smaller government, lower taxes, and that sort of thing. Government stay out of your life and leave you alone, and that that sort of thing. And that's really what I thought. I thought I could be a Republican in that model, for most of my life. And in 2008. I got very involved in the Ron Paul effort, trying to reclaim that strain of republicanism, if you will, in 2008 and 2012. And by the time I ran for office in 2014, it became pretty clear to me that the party wasn't very friendly to that anymore. I mean, they had pockets of it. You had Justin Amash, and you had, Rand Paul even. Ron Paul seemed like he was giving up the ghost on on that strain being really active in the Republican Party. And after a couple of votes that I think were, more libertarian, and the governor called me out in 2016, along with a number of other Republicans who had voted not the way he wanted, it seemed like a good time to make the move for me. And so I had gone to the Libertarian Party state convention in 2016. They had invited me to come and speak because I was the closest thing to a libertarian in the legislature, and I went and spoke to them. And I'd run into a lot of these guys with the Paul movement and Campaign for Liberty, mm-hmm. and that sort of thing before that. And one of them came up to me as we were standing in line for lunch at the Libertarian Party convention, and said, "Hey, Senator, if you ever decided to make a switch, we'd be happy to have you." Okay, well, thanks. I appreciate that. And about a month later, I went to the Republican Party state convention in 2016. And, I wasn't real happy. I wasn't a big Trump supporter, and wasn't real excited with the direction that the party seemed to be going. And that was the time when the governor decided to, call us all out. And I walked away from that pretty sure that I was going to have to make the switch. And by the end of the month, about over over Memorial Day weekend, while everybody else was all the libertarians were in Orlando. I made the switch. I let my constituents know, the people who had donated to me in a previous election. I let them know, and I let the libertarian guys that were at the convention know that I was making the switch, and they announced it on the floor of the convention that somebody that Nebraska was now the home of the latest the most recent libertarian state legislator. And it didn't take too long for the press back here in Nebraska to get wind of it. And I guess I must have been the most likely suspect, because they started calling me. I got a call from the Omaha World Herald, a few days after that, and it was kind of exciting. So.
Yeah, well, and you were one, if I'm not mistaken, you were one of a handful of Republicans that switched. There was actually a Democrat or two as well that switched nationally. But wasn't there even more than one in Nebraska, I thought?
There was a guy who switched in Nevada, who had switched right before I did, and I switched, and the next day he called me up and welcomed me to the club, and then not too long after that, Utah, Senator Madsen switched not too long after that. He didn't run for re-election, and the guy from Nevada didn't win re-election in 2016. So I was and then the guys from New Hampshire switched. Brandon Finney and Caleb Dyer were both Republicans, and Stalcott, I think was his last name. He was a Democrat. He didn't run for re-election. So they had three for a while. They both got beat too. So I don't think there's anybody out there that are libertarians that are state legislators after the first of the year.
Sure. Yeah. No, we had a tough time with the re-incumbents, especially. They just released a post saying, congratulations to the one who won. I think it was like 18 or something. We got a few mayors and some low level, but we'll take what we can get. And really, I feel it's more of a moral war than it is a war about victory right now at all costs. I feel like we got to do the right thing, and we got to build this party up, and we got to build even before party, we got to build the culture and philosophy up too. Now, you mentioned Ron Paul being one of your inspirations. I would say that's probably 98% of our audience. What's when some people associate it with like paleo-libertarianism and anti-immigration, but like also kind of anti-bigoted. What are the things from like the Ron Paul movement? Was it in the Fed? Was it the marriage equality? What are the things about the Ron Paul movement that inspired you the most?
The big thing for me was really sort of a throwback to the libertarian republicanism, smaller government. The end of the Fed stuff. Yeah. Okay. I just like the notion that, we were going to get government out of our business. That it was a, return to sort of a smaller government republicanism. I guess I got excited in 2008 and 2012 over just smaller government again. But I can't say that, I'm not really a, I read a lot of the Lou Rockwell stuff and things like that, in 2008 and 2012. But I can't say that I really, I didn't buy in fully to every word. I wasn't a sycophant, if you will. But I really, I really have great respect for Ron Paul and his ability to be, to be a leader of the movement. And libertarians, whether big L or small L, whether Republican or libertarian, took a lot of inspiration from that movement. And I remember in 2008. I have a very, very vivid memory of some of the early money bombs, and watching with thousands overnight. As I think it was the December 16th one. The first Tea Party money bomb and things like that. It is just just an exciting time to be engaged in the political process again. And when you look at Young Americans for Liberty and the things that they've done in recent years and knocking on doors and they grew out of that movement. So I'm individual elections come and go, but I think a movement moves on, and we are part of a great movement, no matter what party we're part of.
Absolutely. I think I say there's two ways you can name a movement. If you call it young anything, well, you're going to grow out of it in 10 years, unfortunately. You call it modern. I think it's funny, they talk about neo-conservatives, and they were using that term in the 20s, and I'm like, oh, they didn't even know we were going to be here in 100 years being we still call people neocons, Is it really new anymore? I mean, it's tough naming, So let me ask this. Probably one of the few things that I miss about being in the Republican Party is the ability to garner unity. I think libertarians are very much like, oh, are you one of the Ron Paul ones? Or like you were talking about the Lou Rockwell ones. Are you a Murray Rothbard guy? Are you a, Mike Shipley guy? Are you a Nicholas Sarwark guy? Like you almost have to get behind a specific caucus or something. Did you get more of a herding cats feel when you joined the Libertarian Party as opposed to the Republicans, where they just, when I was Republican, people would just embrace you with the R, and they just say, oh yeah, he's Republican. He's one of our guys. It's okay.
Right. Yeah, I think that, that's the great thing about libertarians is it really is about herding cats.
Yeah.
And it's hard to herd cats. But I think that libertarians are learning to be a real party. And that's, one of the things that I've encouraged folks to do. If you read Robert Heinlein's book, Take Your Country Back, or something like that. I don't know what the exact title is. It talks about building parties and building machines. And I think that libertarians need to do more and more of that. We need to be ready to build our party. And that will, the Republicans and Democrats have an advantage over libertarians because they're a habit. People have developed habits, sometimes multi-generational habits of being Republicans or Democrats, and so we have to find ways of making being libertarian a habit. And whether that's as a big L libertarian or as something else, it doesn't really matter if the movement is working right. And so we have to develop that.
Well, I promise you 20 to 30 minutes. I'm approaching the end, and
Okay.
I feel like the one last question that we need to ask. You said you were deciding on some things for your future. Have you decided on some things for your future? What are you looking at?
Sort of, yeah. I plan on writing a book.
Awesome.
About sort of my experience of becoming a big L libertarian, as well as sort of how we might move ahead.
That way you don't have to do this podcast 100,000 times.
Yeah,
one for each person.
well,
you can just say, I've finally written a book.
I've written a book. Here's the link. Go buy it.
Yeah.
That's a part of it. But I enjoy doing this. I intend to continue on within the Libertarian Party. That was kind of crazy. I figured as soon as I got done, and maybe I mentioned this here, I don't remember. I've mentioned several places, but I've got five state party conventions that I'm going to be going to in the early part of next year, and maybe more. Probably after these podcasts, I'll get more people contact. Oh, she's willing to come out. So,
I almost asked you. I'm here in Utah, being like, are we on the block?
Oh, I'd love to. I like to travel around and talk to libertarians around the country, and so I will continue to do that to the extent that anybody asks. There are some other things that I plan on doing. I signed a contract today with an economic freedom think tank here in Nebraska. So I'm going to continue working on occupational licensing reform in that arena, and make a little bit more money. That'll be a good thing. But everything that I am doing is going to be related to growing the movement and to making us more free in different areas. And I'm excited about what I'm going to do. And we'll see what happens in another 2 years or 4 years or 6 years. I enjoy working with libertarians and being around libertarians of all sorts, big L and small L, and I'll do these when I can, and be actively engaged with the Libertarian Party and with the movement generally whenever I can.
Awesome. Well, Laura, thank you so much for sharing your story, your journey, your history with us. I really do appreciate it. I know you've got a lot of commitments, like I said, and I appreciate you taking the time to make this one happen.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. So thanks for having me on.
Anytime. And we will see you around. All
Absolutely.
around.
Absolutely. Thanks.